Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Turnip's Digest, the show that has been on a 2 week hiatus so that I could visit the southeast of the United States to go to Mises University, which we will now be talking about. But before I start, I would like to implore anyone that thinks that if my work is high enough quality and if you generally like what I do, consider supporting. The link is in the description. But for now, we will get on with the show. I am joined today by Josh. Hello, sir.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Very good. And I'm also joined by John. How are you doing, sir?
I'm here.
Very good. So, yeah, like I mentioned,
I'm here.
like I
Some people will
mentioned,
get that joke.
the show was gone for 2 weeks. That was the 2 Saturdays that I was down in Alabama. One to get to MisesU early, and then the other one during MisesU. So I suppose it's very fitting to start off with how we thought the event went. Josh, we'll start with you. What's your general thoughts on the whole MisesU event?
Honestly, it was a great week. I'm trying to just think how best to summarize it. I think so. So it's one thing, like, you kind of know the faculty going in. Like, if you're anyone familiar with the Mises Institute, you've probably seen their videos online or things like that. So like you can see that, and then but the great thing about the Mises University attending in person is that you not only get to meet the faculty in person, you also get to meet the students in person. And I think it really shines. You get to see the quality of people's character, something that you don't necessarily see on the lecture podium.
Alrighty, very good. And John, what about you? What did you think of the event?
I thought it was great, first of all, but I think more importantly, I think it's like a cross section of the state of the right. You really got to see people at every stage of thinking. You had lecturers who, where we were maybe 5 years ago, people who were where we are 3 years ago, and people who are maybe even, thinking ahead a couple months from where we are now. Talking to Tho Bishop was great. The thing about talking to Tho Bishop is you're never sure if Tho Bishop knows you well or is just really good at remembering names. Because by day 2, he was addressing me by my first name and acting as if like I was his best friend. And I don't actually know if he thought I was cool or he's just really good at remembering names. I don't know. Real nice guy, but yeah. I think it was a great experience. I recommend everyone who can should apply.
Alrighty. So with that being said, I suppose I'll give my account. I thought it was absolutely splendid. I obviously co-host a show with Stephen Carson, whose channel is Radical Liberation on YouTube. He and also Per Byland is my professor at Oklahoma State University. So I had both of those two forces telling me to go to Mises University for quite a while. So my expectations were already sky high, and they were very wildly surpassed. It was generally a very enjoyable experience, and I definitely understand things a lot more now. So those are our general thoughts. I'm sure we will elaborate much more as we go on. So we could do this very structuredly. We could go sort of lecture by lecture, or we can just sort of have a free-flowing discussion. It's whatever you two really want. But I think we'll start off with what was your guys' favorite lecture? What was it? Who gave it? Why was it your favorite? And for anyone
that's a tough question.
Right, I should say for anyone that didn't attend, it doesn't matter, or I didn't watch because they're also on YouTube. It doesn't matter because I'm sure we'll get into details after we talk about what we liked about things.
I guess I'd have to say, David Gordon's praxeology lecture. Just hearing him speak on that, just how straight, consistently logical he is, and then the questions that people have. It's always a interesting time. So,
alrighty, and John.
Oh, it's hard to say. I think Dr. Sean Rittenauer is probably the most entertaining lecturer. You really can't beat him. in that regard. I thought the division of labor and social order
Yeah,
was just by far. What was I think that was the one about the cake.
right. Structure of production and
Structure of
everything that goes
cake.
into making.
Yeah, flourless chocolate cake.
Yeah,
We need to get the
flourless
recipe. So,
Um,
So
I think by far, if you really want it, if you were going in without any really prior knowledge of Austrian economics, I think that would have been the best lecture. As far as the one that interested me the most was those lecture on last day about how the New York Times stole the presidential election.
right. So for anyone that for more background for the audience that did not catch any of this, which I would presume is the majority, but I could always be surprised. Sean Rittenauer, that John mentioned, gave an explanation of basically the structure of production as we Austrians see it through the lens of analyzing how do we get flourless chocolate cake. Now, it was hilarious, but it was also a superb just explanation of how production works and just how complex everything that we see around us, how complex the creation of it actually is. And I think that's a lot of for people that get economics wrong. That is something that might seem like a minor detail, just how complex production is and how that leads to greater things being put around us. And it has very dire consequences if wrong. So definitely one of the more important lectures that was there. And also the Tho Bishop, in his very populistic fashion, very charming, I must say, gave a presentation on Samuel Tilden. So, yeah, both of those very good. And as for me, I should have had an answer to my own question before asking. I think I would have to say that my favorite was the for the simple fact it was probably Pear's very sort of provocative comparison of the destruction of Dresden to the destruction brought about by regulations.
Yes, but it is just an afternoon bombing. The division of labor will quickly sort it out.
So, and for people that don't know what I'm talking about, Pear gave a lecture comparing the bombing of Dresden, assuming, or not assuming, but regardless of human lives lost, comparing the destruction brought about by the bombing of Dresden compared to the destruction and the unseen effects of regulation, just any regulation at all. A very provocative way of presenting it, and I thought it was a very, I like the provocativeness of things. So, probably my favorite out of the lectures.
Did he show the one picture where you have honestly, I can't remember which city it is. It might be Detroit, but I'm not sure. Where it's basically, I better be right on this. Like blocks just destroyed, but it's from regulation, not from bombing.
Let me see. I don't think he did, but that. I'll tell that to him because that can make it even more provocative for the next time.
I'm sure he's seen it before. I don't know where.
Because I definitely have seen it. So I'd be shocked if someone that specializes in the effects of regulation hadn't seen a visual meme of it.
And I will say another favorite lecture. So it may. So I went to cards on the table. I went to Grove City, so I've had my fair share of lectures from Dr. Rittenauer and Dr. Herbner who teach there. But Herbner's so I really liked Rittenauer's presentations. I think he has it down for an early like introducing people to Austrian economics. He has a book that kind of lays out Christian epistemology leading right into Austrian economics, and that'd be Foundations of Economics, a Christian View. But the lecture I really enjoyed was Herbner's lecture, only because I had read his book that he edited this year, or not that he edited. I read it this year on the pure time preference theory of interest. So he's kind of presenting, basically his presentation caught all those, you could call it like hair splits that happen in the theory of interest. So definitely recommend checking that out.
Right, and yeah, we were pointing out our favorite lectures, but that's not to say that 99% of them weren't very, very high quality.
Yeah.
So Herbner, that Josh just mentioned, gave a few lectures towards the beginning on, well, I don't want to say the more basic side, but the more fundamental side of things. Also, definitely an excellent presenter. Someone, oh, and I'll get the picture ready, but he has a very sort of plain, easy to grasp manner of explaining things without sacrificing the depth of the subject matter.
Yeah.
So,
and if anyone wants to watch the lectures, they were all recorded on the Mises Media YouTube channel, has recordings of all the lectures this week. So if you want to watch those.
I need to go back and watch the Tho Bishop one. It was How the New York Times Stole the Presidency. I also want to go back and watch Jeff Deist's talk on dressing professionally.
yeah. So the last day when everyone was taking the exams for the audience, we had a set of 3 presentations that weren't entirely related to just the pure economics part, like we had been discussing through the rest of the week. As has already been mentioned, Jeff Deist gave an excellent presentation on how to dress properly, but also on a budget. So he, so since you didn't see it, Josh, he completely trashed black suits. For any musician, I had a hard time reconciling that, because that's like the one thing you need in your wardrobe if you're a musician is black.
So black suit, tuxedo, even.
Well, I mean, if you're playing in like the Philharmonic Orchestra, yeah, I mean, everyone's going to have a matching black suit, but
right. So
doing gigs at the local bar. Sorry, I'm not going to respect you if you're wearing a black suit.
So, that was my one nitpick. Joking, in jest, obviously, but very good talk. Tho Bishop gave his aforementioned talk on the 1876 election, and then we also had Daniel McAdams from the Ron Paul Institute, who gave a talk on foreign policy at all being a bad thing, and also a sort of distortive effect for the rich in society. Which I thought was very good, because usually the standard libertarian talking point is that set policies benefit, the wealthy and have all these sort of state welfare programs attached. This gentleman gave an excellent lecture lambasting any and all foreign policy from the state as having that same effect. So, I like the radicalism.
Right. I think like he started with the idea that foreign aid is welfare for the rich in other countries.
Right.
But then he amped that up. That's what all foreign policy is what
right.
he argued in the lecture. So, yeah.
And he sort of acknowledged this idea. I think he said something at the beginning akin to like, oh, everyone's heard the talking point that foreign aid is welfare for the rich in other countries. But get ready for what I'm about to tell you. Something like that. It was very, I quite enjoyed that one. And we also got to witness the first graduates from the Mises graduate program. That is, has potential to be very historically significant if we play our cards right. Jonathan Newman, Dr. Jonathan Newman, gave a very wonderful speech, also up on YouTube, on the importance of truth. And I think that was probably the most impactful speech that I heard out of anything that was spoken there. I quite like that speech. If you two will,
you have to wonder how many graduation speeches do not emphasize truth today. So that was certainly something very special.
Right. Yeah. John, your thoughts?
Oh no, I thought it was really well. Not only was it a powerful speech, but I think it kind of spoke to the zeitgeist of the right now, and how there is, in response to everything we see, there is this temptation to become basically anti-rational and pro-line. And I think it kind of spoke against that inclination that, you do have to cling on to truth in the face of modernity.
Right, exactly, and that was that, and I think that it was definitely more palatable to me. Not that anything there was against anything that I believe necessarily, but he was emphasizing just the fundamental importance of truth, regardless of the perspective. So he had a very sort of a Christian way of explaining things that I thought was very important for anything, obviously. Because I believe Christianity is a fundamental to any sort of reality that we examine. So
it looks like Prax Ben is in the live chat.
Yeah, I sent him the link. He'll be joining. I was I'll explain more whenever he gets on, and so definitely Jonathan Newman's speech on truth, one of the highlights I thought. Yeah, I think that's the basics. Now, here's sort of a curveball. Which one of these things did you like the least, and why? And I should preface this. I don't think this means that any of us hate anything.
Boy, yeah.
I don't think that we're egalitarian, so we could talk about the mountains and mountains and things that we liked about it all day, but we might as well get the sort of controversial things out there.
Okay, I'll start. What is ESG? I think, have people forgotten that exists? Have people forgotten that civil rights legislation exists and is the law in the Western world?
Here,
this is not market phenomena. This is not Walrasian equilibrium. This is not marginal utility at work.
Hold that thought, because I'm sure all of us can go out on that for an hour if we wanted to. But we have Prax Ben that has joined us today. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, it's me, Prax Ben. I'm here in my big mansion, my real mansion with my piano and everything. So yeah.
So Prax Ben was another gentleman that we met at MisesU. If you hadn't come across his work already, it will be added to the description. That is entirely my fault, because he informed me that he might not make it, so I was waiting for confirmation this morning, and I entirely miscommunicated that. He is here now, though.
I was thinking it was starting at 10. Like 10 Eastern time, I mean.
No, I believe it would be 9. So
yeah.
Anyways, I suppose we'll let you give a summary of what you thought about the event, and then we will jump back onto John's ESG rant, because I'm sure we all have a piece to say on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. I think the greatest part was definitely like meeting all the different people, not only the actual economists and lecturers, but the other students. And I have to say, I was I wouldn't say surprised, but I was very pleased with the physiognomy of the event. I thought it was wonderful, especially since just the following week after that, you had the International Marxist University, which is like their MisesU. And if you go and like look at the physiognomy, then kind of makes you want to throw up in your mouth a little bit, right? So it was really fantastic. You had a lot of people who clearly like work out and put effort into themselves, and that's really great to see, as the younger generation of libertarians is starting to really get out there. I think it's fantastic. I'm really optimistic for the future. But yeah, the lectures were fantastic too. I mean, I've watched a lot of them online before, but it's really great to hear them in person. My favorite one was probably the MMT one by Lucas Engelhardt. I thought that one was really great. I actually compacted it into 3 minutes in a TikTok video, to the best of my ability. I think I got it down pretty well, and I just kind of like sent people over to different sources and stuff so they could expand on certain points. But yeah, it was awesome. I really miss it. Experiencing what we call that post MisesU depression.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
All right, very good. Yeah, and it should be mentioned, Engelhardt, absolutely astounding presenter of information. He has a very has a very nice voice for it, but it also has a very great way of presenting information so that people don't get overwhelmed, but also, presents all the sides of things somehow in the span of 45 minutes. It was very impressive, I thought.
He also got drip.
Yeah, he definitely did. He was probably in the top 5 out of the people that dressed nicest that were at the event, if not top 3. And we'll come back to the discussions that we had with each of the individuals later for the ones that we are willing and able to talk about. So I suppose we'll jump back on track now, though, before we lose sight of what we were talking about. So ESG and non-market phenomenon. John, take us away.
Well, yeah, I felt like there was just a systematic misunderstanding of why culture is going the way it's going. And I felt this especially from Dr. Klein's lecture. What was it? Wokeness and something. Was it wokeness and capital or something? I was listening to this lecture, and he's talking about like tapered production structures and why middle management having too much influence. It's like, hold on a minute. Like this is a legal problem. Like these are laws in America. There are laws about who you can hire, right? There are laws about you have to be in compliance with civil rights legislation, and that means having a basically full-time class of political commissars in every office that enforce these things, right? The middle management class hasn't grown because it's just good business to pay people to sit and work on laptops doing nothing. It's because it's the law. And I think there's this great, like very obvious Austrian analysis there that was just kind of missed throughout the whole thing. I think Tho gets it. I talked to Tho, and I think Per Byland also, I think he also kind of understands it, but just in general, I think it was lacking.
Right. So Dr. Peter Klein gave a lecture, which, in spite of the flaws that John just pointed out, I still thought it was he offers some explanations that can sometimes get missed by our side, but I don't think that they are necessarily the driving factors of why all these corporations are going down the ideological path that they are. My opinion has still not changed at all on that front. And I did get the opportunity to ask him a question, I think during that evening's panel of presenters. I was basically just trying to gently nudge him in that direction, asking if sort of if the Obama era nationalizations and the government takeover kind of putting their people in power in these sort of industries, if that could be an explanation, gently nudging him into that sort of legal direction rather than a sort of natural explanation for why all the corporations can just go left wing. He didn't buy it as much. That's fine. I don't expect every single Austrian to be exactly our perspective, but that was definitely something that I thought could have been expounded upon perhaps by other lectures. Was sort of the legal nature of what we're coming across, especially in entertainment, media, and all these other things where, either by legal finagling or other measures, a set few families have gotten to control the entire media apparatus and a lot of political maneuvering in the country. And, just suddenly everything has gone left wing, almost as if a very organized minority has influenced things. So, if anyone else would like to take up the subject.
I don't really think I have anything to add there. I mean, I think like Peter Klein's lecture, I think it was just good as so far as it goes. So, yeah.
I think Peter Klein's first version of the lecture was much better. It's the one he presented at the last supporter summit back in October. But it was still good. I think he made a lot of good points, but there's definitely a lot that needs to be expanded upon. Like obviously a big thing that comes into play is democracy itself, right? Because not only do you have these companies like trying to appeal to the majority and what they hear is the loud, annoying people in the society, right? But also you have people who are trying to get into different institutions and industries and stuff like that in order to have a larger influence over large amounts of people because of democracy, because you want to influence the way people vote and stuff like that. And I don't remember specifically who pointed out, it might have been Dr. Timothy Torrell, but there are just certain jobs that right-wingers aren't getting into as much. The specific example they used was mostly education, but it's also the case in like corporations and stuff like that. And that's largely because if you look at like a bell curve of like IQ, then right-wingers are here and here. They're either retarded or they're really smart. And left-wingers are all like, kind of filling in that area. So left-wingers are going to fill in all of these different jobs. They're going to be teachers. They're going to have these kind of lower end management roles in corporations and stuff like that. Stuff that right-wingers aren't going to be caught dead doing, even if they had the opportunity to do it, because they're like, oh, screw that. They're going to find more productive things to do. They're going to go and be a freaking farmer, or they're going to go and be a CEO of a Bitcoin company or some dumb shit like that. So yeah, I think democracy is a big problem, and I think the fact that you don't have right-wingers kind of filling in those spaces or trying to fill in those spaces is a problem. And I talked a little bit about this last night in the debate on Springtime of Nations, where I said right-wingers really should be going out there and learning and bettering themselves and trying to get into all of these institutions as much as possible, to get into everything, infiltrate everything you possibly can.
Yeah, I'm strongly
that's how you
anti-plumber
win.
pilled. I'm anti-plumber pill. I cannot stand this. Well, you should just go trade school. It's like no, actually, I want to have power. If you have money and you have the IQ, you should have institutional power. Yeah, no, yeah, literally.
Right. So yeah. So this. He and I would disagree on a lot of things, but I do think he had a point here, and this was I'm not the first person to say he had a point. I believe there's 40 million other people that probably saw this and thought the same thing. So I would like to balance this by saying some people are meant for trades. But the right wing should not be trying to funnel every single young right winger into trades just because that's sort of like the base contrarian thing to do when the left controls academia. Also, on the other hand, I would say you don't want to control academia. You want to build your own. There's no point trying to take over what will be a dying husk. So Scott Greer, I would say, has a point where the right is sort of by I don't think it was contrarianism necessarily, pointing out, hey, you could go to trade school, be a farmer, and all this other stuff. Very admirable things for the people that can do it. In doing so, they've kind of set up the expectation that all the right-wing youth should become tradesmen and farmers and should just completely abandon the sort of academic side of things.
Yeah, the right is naturally secessionist by its very nature. I think like Nick Land talks about this in The Dark Enlightenment, that the psychology of the right, especially in America, given that the history of what America's found in stock being literally people who did not want to fight a religious war, so they moved. That is the psychology of the right wing, is to move out and find new territory, but that's just not an option anymore.
I think a big problem, again, with like the colleges is boomer conservative parents are scared of the liberal indoctrination in colleges, or the left-wing indoctrination. And that's kind of a myth. Like, obviously, you have a lot of left-wing professors and faculty and stuff like that, but the fact of the matter is people usually don't change ideology in college. A large majority of the time that doesn't happen. You don't have a bunch of right-wingers going into colleges and turning into left-wingers. Like, some people may be able to point out like specific examples, like, oh, there's this guy I knew, but on a large scale, on a statistical scale, that doesn't happen. They don't change ideologies. Even like there's even studies like looking at how much time students spend with faculty members, and even that doesn't have any large effect on their political ideology.
For the 4 people that will go in during office hours to their professor, yeah.
And also, and that there are more conservative colleges out there. I mean, there's Grove City, Hillsdale. You look at like the classical Christian schools; they're like affiliated with different colleges.
Right.
But I mean, today, I mean, with the internet, I know Prax Ben, like you've talked about, just like doing self-study to a large extent, and honestly, that's awesome. It's great.
Right, and you know, that might be one of the closer ways forward, is just to do what you need to in order to sustain a family and yourself, but also on the side study up and try to form this sort of new academia. We definitely, for anyone that hasn't noticed in our spheres, we have enough people that could be in another time without credentialism reigning. You know, could have been, you know, A+ historians, A+, statisticians even. Like I know that we have quite a few mathematicians in our ranks that just don't have the necessary degrees in order to say that they are top in their field. This self-studying stuff, very good. And it also turns out that reality does not necessarily ask you for your degree in order to ensure that you're competent. So I quite like the self-studying route, but perhaps there's a dissenting opinion here.
I think, well, I kind of see both sides to it, because if you're self-studying and if you want to talk to a professor, you can literally just send them an email. So there's that. Now there would be something like if you go to like a different college, like if you want to study under Dr. Byland or Dr. Herbner or Dr. Ritnow or whoever it would be, you can. The advantage there is that you get to go to their office hours pretty often. So while if you are doing that, like make sure you're taking advantage of that. I get like value. I think you can say, okay, maybe going to college these days is not for most people a wise decision, but I think it is for some people. So
right, and yeah, this might also tie into how the Mises Institute has arranged their graduate program. I don't know if you guys caught the detail, but they said they were trying to make it as cheap as possible, and they were also trying to make sure that it was online and sort of, I don't want to say loosely confederated, but you have all these different Mises Institute affiliated professors that will be teaching classes online that you're supposed to have very easy access to. So they're trying to basically bridge all these gaps without charging as much as an actual graduate program, and also being as they are this faculty, the people that we also learned from this last week, you know, you can be assured that the quality is also going to be high. So, you know, this could be an example of kind of what we're talking about, because I don't think anyone would consider the Mises Institute to be traditional academia, nor do I think anyone would consider online university and education to be considered traditional academia. But with the work that they're doing, and considering they just graduated their first cohort, there's still things yet to be proven, but I think it's going to be pretty challenging for some of the more traditional university systems if this catches on.
You know, isn't like Jordan Peterson trying to do some sort of online university as well? Like, I mean, it seems to be kind of a trend, which, you know, I don't know if that's going to go well, but
yeah, well, yeah, we might save that for later on in the discussion. The question of Jordan Peterson and his endeavors.
The Jordan Peterson question, a very important one.
The JPQ.
Yeah, we'll save that for now. Yeah, let's continue. Gentlemen, what did we find lacking in the Mises Institute University from last week? You know, our very controversial opinions.
I think you've heard mine.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you've heard mine.
Oh, sorry. I guess what I'd say, I think you have kind of like a wide range of the student body, like how steeped into this are they, things like that. So you get kind of a variety of questions. Some are a lot more basic, some are a little bit more advanced. Some are kind of just off the wall. So it's an interesting time. Yeah, I was trying to think, like, I don't know, is it worth, like, oh, should they have these questions written down beforehand or something like that? There
Yeah.
also is something to say for like someone just being like willing to stand up and ask in front of everyone. So
There was that is definitely a filtering aspect. There was the poor gentleman that stood up to ask a question and forgot immediately. That was
yeah,
but there was also, I have a feeling if they were written down and pre-submitted, we wouldn't have been able to have some of the either slightly more off-topic or slightly stranger discussions. People in my audience will obviously know of Evelyn Grant, who got up and asked David Gordon after the Hans Hermann Hoppe lecture about Hoppian Leninism, which very brave, regardless of what you might think of it, and Evelyn actually got to engage Dr. Gordon on the issue, who took the idea seriously, read what was written, and had his own responses. It was quite astounding to see for such a bold move, I thought.
yeah.
I don't know if perhaps you guys remember other questions that stayed with you.
Yeah, like literally every question Eli ever asked, where he's just like, "Yeah, so do people have value?"
Okay, right. So this is great. I'm glad you brought that up. There's a very inquisitive gentleman, very astute, who after the lecture on Hans Hermann Hoppe, asked Dr. Gordon, what was it? Does human life have value? Something along those lines.
Like that, yeah.
And
I hear his voice.
and Dr. Gordon responded, well, I think according to Hans Hoppe, it would depend on who you're talking about. and it was riotous. That was amazing. But
Yeah.
we had very serious question that was taken in jest by Dr. Gordon, like so many questions are. But I don't know how, if I were put on the spot on a panel and I had like 2 minutes to answer a question, how would you answer a question like that is so broad?
Mm-hmm.
Does human life have value? And that's not to say that the question's bad or the intentions were bad or anything else. This is by no means a criticism. It's just the structure could potentially be different to allow for questions like that to actually be asked productively. But that would again come at the trade-off of the open questionnaire style that we had.
I guess it'd be probably at the end of the day, it's probably better to have the questions like asked like right there. Sure, there are trade-offs, but I will say, actually, going off of questions like that aren't necessarily economic questions, but like questions of value and things like that. What I really enjoyed about the whole week was like a lot of religious discussion, things like that. Like just so it was really cool. Like there's some Orthodox Christians, there's some Catholic Christians, there's some a few objectivists.
A lot of Protestants.
A lot of Protestants. Everything like all over the place. I believe there was one Sikh gentleman.
Yep. Yes, there was. And you can tell by the headwear. But the religious discussions was an aspect of the event that I wasn't expecting. I assumed, given my contact with a few people online, there would certainly be religious, Christianity certainly would probably be brought up as a topic. What I did not expect was that it would come up probably multiple times a day for the entire week. And we had very ardent Roman Catholics. We had a few Orthodox. I don't remember what kind they were. A lot of Presbyterians. I believe was it Herbner and Rittenauer were Presbyterians. I could be wrong on Herbner. I got told that Rittenauer was OPC.
I think so, but yeah.
And which I imagine a lot of the
I'm not exactly sure.
I imagine a lot of the Great City cohort would probably be in agreement with the sort of Calvinist Protestantism. There was a group of 4 Lutherans that was there. Me and 3 others. Not to brag, we had the only clergyman in attendance. That was definitely something. But a lot of people that had converted, so a lot of people that were very inclined to the more theological side of religion. So there was a lot of very in-depth philosophical and theological discussion. There was a group of us one night from about 11:45 to 12:30 or so in the morning that were discussing human nature. There was a lot of disputes on that. Anyways, gentlemen, the religious discussions, I'd like any of you to elaborate if you want to, because that was something that surprised me.
Sean Rittenauer is definitely a Protestant. Like I was reading over his book, Foundations of Economics, a Christian Perspective. I think that's what it's called. And it's definitely from a very Protestant perspective, but I'm not sure about the specifics. But yeah, there was a lot of religious discussions that I found myself in. Most of the time I didn't really participate, mostly because it was usually like the Catholics and the Orthodox like talking to each other. I'm like, I don't know what any of you guys are talking about. I don't know what any of this stuff means. But there was one night. It was when everybody, a bunch of people went to the Korean barbecue place and stuff, and I was with Baker and Alex and Lance and Annika, and me and Lance are Baptist, and Lance is Reformed Baptist, and then Baker and Alex are Orthodox, and we just had like this whole debate on if you could lose your salvation and like all these different things. And
right, and
at Chick-fil-A, the best place to have it.
I remember one of the things that I said like a year and a half ago in just a random discussion that stuck with me is I've said the internet is a mistake because it allows Southern Baptists to discuss with Eastern Orthodox. Something that should never have happened historically otherwise. And we got to witness that here. So that was fireworks were flying. And then I had during lunch you got to sit with a variety of lecturers, a variety of students, and various faculty members. One of the afternoons I sat with Dr. Engelhardt, and one of the rarest finds there. Dr. Engelhardt is a Quaker, which Quakerism in our circles gets quite a bad rap. But he's very intelligent, very learned in theological history. Obviously, I don't agree with his conclusions, but very informative discussion that I had with him. Everyone was there. It seemed there was very few denominations that were not represented. So, if anyone else have anything to add on sort of like the religious discussions topic?
Yeah. It reminds me of like 2016, 2017, how everyone like collected a new quirky right-wing ideology. You remember this.
That's still happening. Now, what do you mean 2016?
Yeah, but it was different back then because they were they would pick this was like the golden age of Chan culture, and people would just sort of subsume this new political ideology, and I'm seeing that now with religion. It's interesting to see. It really is interesting to see, and everyone's doing it. It's like all over the right now. It is the thing to do. It is the thing. Spiritual journeys are in. Now, whether or not that will lead to sort of a lasting, any kind of lasting religious revival, I don't know. But it is certainly interesting to see.
I'd say the real measure of your success at MisesU is the number of people you convert.
All right,
I converted so many people to anti-banking, so I think that means I kind of won it. Because everyone's like, oh, fractional reserve banking, full reserve banking. I'm like, no, anti-banking. Keep all your money in your pockets. Banks are communist.
The mattress ideology, yeah.
Exactly.
So, and that does, if there's nothing else that anyone would like to add on the religious topic, that does bring us nicely into a different one. and so we have all the different religious perspectives, but there were actually people that were non-Austrians that attended. And once again, all of this is meant to just have a sort of a descriptive quality of what we saw. None of this should be considered as gossip or anything bad like that. There's a gentleman there who was a self-described market monetarist. Very interesting to talk to, especially after Bob Murphy gave his lecture on market monetarism and parts of the 2008 response. So, we had that gentleman there. There was a couple of minarchists there that hadn't fully gone along with the sort of Austrian analysis of the modern state. So,
yeah, there were some like younger people there who were like probably looking at studying economics, and they were still like unfamiliar with like you see the monetarist Austrian divide. So there's also some of that.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because if this was 4 or 5 decades ago, you could see sort of mainstream economics being divided into monetarism and sort of the Chicagoite school, Keynesianism, and then like everything else. In the modern day, that distinction is not really so clear. So what you end up with is potentially a bunch of youth that just get into economics and try to sort of blend all these different opinions into what sounds correct without going into the underlying fundamentals. Because I remember I was discussing with a few gentlemen before the debate on gold and Bitcoin, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. I was discussing with a couple of them on the ethics and the sort of upsides of a central bank trying to stop a bust under the how a Chicagoite would describe it. And this isn't a question of like of morality or ethics even. It's a question of fundamentals, because that discussion that we had on the boom bust cycle and then preceding it, sort of capital structure, where we talked about how sort of central bank intervention and various other factors will cause producers to invest in longer, more complex modes of production that aren't feasible during a boom. It's just sort of unrealized at that point, and then whenever the realization comes about, they sell off things, and that suddenly becomes the bust when people try to liquidate all of these modes of productions that were infeasible. Grossly summarizing, but that very certainly blows a hole into the idea that the central bank should try to stop a bust, because in the Austrian understanding, then a bust becomes sort of positive. It's people more rationally allocating resources. So
right. Malinvestments being liquidated.
Right. So whenever you have people that sort of try to mix and match these economic systems of thought, you lose sight of the fundamentals, and that's I guess one of the consequences or one of the downsides of the modern state of economic thought. So, gentlemen, I didn't mean to go on for such a long rant. If any of you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, I have, like you said, no gossip or anything. I don't have any like contempt for a large majority of people who were there.
And it should be noted, everyone was on very friendly terms. Like, this isn't like animosity that we're just like bringing to you with a smile on our face. Everyone was on very friendly and very, very respectable terms. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah. There was this one fellow who was a great dude, really, but he was having a really hard time kind of like jumping on board with the Austrian methodology and especially epistemology. And he was like debating a couple of my friends about it, and what I was doing is I called it me being a little bit devious. I would kind of like sneak into the conversation, like they're just standing in a circle. I'd just sneak in every now and then just say something crazy, get everybody thinking, and it was a lot of fun. So they were like talking about empiricism versus rationalism, and he's like, well, you guys keep saying all this stuff about subjective value and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, none of this stuff can be empirically tested, right? You have to empirically test it. It's unfalsifiable. And then I just kind of popped in. I'm like, well, so you're an empiricist, right? And you agree that a statement is meaningless unless it can be empirically verified. And I'm like, can that statement be empirically verified? And he just stares at me, and then I just walk away and don't even wait for the answer. I'm like, there you go. And I did the same thing like 3 times with different questions. And I never heard the answer because I would just walk away and not even listen to what he was going to say next.
Right,
So that was a lot of fun. But like I said, he was a nice guy.
Yeah, amazing rhetorical strategy there. And you don't even need to hear the answer. Like the work is very obviously done if you pause for a moment to think about it. So anyway,
Exactly.
John, Josh, anything that you guys would like to add?
Yeah, I think it's just a problem with how economics is taught. I mean, from the high school level, economics is non-unified, right? You learn microeconomics, which is basically Carl Menger for the first 3 weeks, and then neoclassical market models, and then you just go to Keynesianism and macro. And there's really no attempt to unify economic theory. So it leaves people with a lot of just bizarre misunderstandings of economics. I was talking to Dr. Salerno, I think it was on the first day, about like my experience in college and how my instructors just didn't really get the principle of marginal utility. They didn't quite get how value is imputed. They don't understand that time is non-homogeneous, that that a good is a good when it provides satisfaction and not just in and of itself. It doesn't, a good just sitting there is not a good. It actually has to provide satisfaction. And I think without that, you basically have 2 disconnected economics, right? You have 2 different economic branches which don't really interact much. If you're studying aggregate demand and aggregate supply, you're really not making use of underlying microeconomic theory in that study. If you're doing econometrics, you're not making any use of any of the Mengerian or the marginalist tools at your disposal. So I think it leads to a bad mentality in economics in general.
I'd say I believe they've attempted to provide solid micro foundations for these macroeconomic theories. I guess as Austrian, the argument is, well, they failed in that attempt. So I'd say with the market monetarist theory, with what Scott Sumner advocates, it's all these aggregates interacting. The thing is, aggregates do not act. People do. Right.
And that was one of the important parts of Dr. Gordon's lecture that I thought could have been underlined more, but I thought that I was very grateful that it was underlined, where he said at the end, collectives don't act. That doesn't mean that collectives don't exist, but there's no collective being that acts. And that's probably where we get a lot of separation, just in that one small articulation between Austrians and everyone else. There's no entity that you can point to and see the actions of that is the United States, and you can see every single one of his economic actions. There are people within that entity, perhaps, that do act, but action is unique to those individual entities, not a collective. It's shocking how basic misunderstandings at this fundamental level can lead to such borderline insane ideologies coming out of it. I was on a Stephen's stream this last Thursday. We were talking about the Knights of Labor and how American labor unions went from a very sort of cooperative stance with their employers to one that was extremely militant, with the underlying reason being that they thought that that their interests were fundamentally opposed, that they fundamentally, as workers, had just oppositional wants to their employers, and also did not believe in something like wealth creation. They thought it was just a battle for what existed. These very fundamental ideas in the United States history, at least, would bring about great amounts of bloodshed. So too with this idea of collectives and individuals acting. You get sort of the stranger strands of economic thought on the right that believe that collectives do act, and that they do have economic actions, and that leads them down a very sort of strange, very warped path, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think like how you say, we can ascribe people's actions to like a collective body, but it doesn't mean that that collective body is the actor there. It's always still the methodological individualism.
I would actually argue, like on that point about like the unions, that there's actually more contradictions, so to speak, within workers than there are with workers and capitalists. Because as a worker and as a consumer of, you know, your average consumer goods, you want cheaper goods, right? And a large cost in producing goods is labor. So if people were paid significantly less, other people besides yourself who, you know, work in other industries that you don't work in, then that would benefit you because you would get cheaper goods. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, it's in your best interest to an extent, of course, you know, not truly, but on a surface level, it's in your best interest for everyone else in every other industry that you don't work in to be paid significantly less than they already are. Right. Like if you're hiring a plumber, you know, wouldn't it be in your best interest for him to be paid half of what he is? You know, your money's not going somewhere else where you might want it to go. You know, some unexpected costs pop up, like your car breaks down. You know, you don't want to spend a ton of money fixing your car.
Right. It's cheaper goods, and that you know, lower cost means that more can be produced. Which we actually got into this somewhat on the stream about labor unions, not exactly along that line of thought, but you will see conflicts racially among labor unions throughout most of American labor history, where especially out west, if the Chinese refused to strike, then the Knights of Labor just gunned them down. So you see a lot of these conflicting interests. The Chinese didn't see much value in striking because they were getting paid much more than they would have been back home in the empire. However, the Knights of Labor wanted more, and from their perspective were being paid much less than they were, I believe in the example of the Rock Springs Massacre, than they were 2 years ago, something like that. Very conflicting perspectives, conflicting interests, and conflicting standards of living kind of drives a wedge into all of this.
Yeah, if you're a labor union, then more diversity means it's harder to get unanimous decisions. It's harder to make these collective decisions. So therefore, you're going to strive for a more homogenous labor union, a homogenous like group of people, because, you know, like you want everybody to agree with you, right? Like nobody's going in a labor union because they want to have some like disagreements and debates and actually be like voting on things. They want it because they want a group of people to have the same ideas that they do and to put those ideas into practice.
Right.
Yeah, now, you know, labor is not the enemy of capital. Labor is the enemy of itself when it consumes.
Well, I mean, so one of the things that Stephen points out on that stream, and that we probably talked about quite a lot when we were discussing the structure of production and capital theory, is that you know, as more and more capital is accumulated, you have more and more wealth gets generated. You have more capacity to hire more people to do more, and this sort of division of labor that plays into it, but also as a result, can become more and more complex. And people can specialize more and more into what they are good at, which, you know, ironically for the labor unions, which typically oppose this capital accumulation, which is part of what leads to all this, that specialization truly makes people unreplaceable. If I in modern society say that we have an extremely good rocket scientist, there's not many of those around. They're a very highly specialized field that if we did not have everything that we have built so far, we would not have rocket scientists. So if, you know, God forbid, if something were to happen to one of them, very difficult to replace, which is what a lot of unions in their rhetoric will employ against capital accumulation and production, is that they claim that this makes workers replaceable, which is couldn't be farther from the truth. Basic misunderstanding that leads to a lot of conflict and bloodshed.
Yeah, the rocket scientists are so difficult to replace. That's why the Soviet Union orchestrated World War II, because they wanted to get a bunch of free rocket scientists. That was the whole reason.
Start
At
that
least that's my working theory.
start that theory and make a lot of media surrounding it. You'll be a millionaire by the end of the year.
Probably.
So, anything else left to add on the on anything that we've just discussed, gentlemen?
Nope.
Jonathan?
No, I'm good.
Alrighty, magnificent. So, I suppose we could talk about the. I believe it was Tuesday evening. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it was Tuesday evening that we had a debate between two people that were aligned with the Mises Institute. I don't know that they are full affiliates, but I could be wrong. Discussing the merits of what it turned into was gold versus Bitcoin as a currency. We'll elaborate soon. This was not what was originally printed and sold to us in the and as a resolution for the debate, but it's what it turned into, and it was entertaining nonetheless. We had one gentleman who defended gold as being a very probable potential currency when, or I should say, if and when the U.S. dollar collapses as a currency. And we had one gentleman that was refuting that, saying, no, Bitcoin is going to be the currency in use. So, gentlemen, could you fill in the audience on some details? What were your thoughts? What was being said? We'll start with you, John. We'll just sort of work our way clockwise down the panel.
Okay. Full disclosure, I saw the word gold in the title, and I knew it was going to be about Bitcoin, so I just didn't show up. I wouldn't hang out with friends. I went with Evelyn, and we went out on the town and did stuff. So, yeah.
Nice.
All right, we'll come back to you soon.
But
Then.
my opinion on it is, yeah, I mean, gold, Bitcoin isn't money yet, but gold's not money anymore. Whether or not they'll be useful in the future depends on what kind of future we have. Surprisingly, like almost everyone I talked to is anti-Monero, which
Really?
Yeah, even like the pro-Bitcoin people were anti-Monero, and it's like, I understand like why you don't think it will, like you're not maximalist on it, but still, like it's better as money. That's
like
just
use case.
It's just cheaper to transact and more private. It's just better as money, in my opinion. I'm not shilling for it, but it is what it is. So that's my whole take on the situation.
So, Josh, your ideas, what was discussed, because you were there.
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember the exact proposition they had written down, and then the one basically, I liked how they switched to perhaps a more interesting and arguable thing is basically just gold versus Bitcoin. But basically, the way the proposition originally was will gold have a monetary role
in the post-dollar society,
the post-dollar world? And I was like, well, I'm like, okay, well, obviously, yes. And so the debate was moot as far as even touching on that proposition, I think. But as far as the gold versus Bitcoin discussion, I think that was very interesting. They had the gold guy had some good rhetorical things. Like he pulled out a gold coin. Because I think the Bitcoin guy, Pierre Rochard, he said it's a lot easier to verify Bitcoin than it is to verify gold. So the gold guy had a coin, and like there's a signature sound that it makes. So
right, inherent to the metal itself.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I'm still unsure. Like, yeah, I'm generally pro Bitcoin, pro gold. Yeah,
right.
The debate did not really change my opinion on things. So
awesome. So Ben, if you were present for the debate, what was your thoughts? Fill in the audience some of what was discussed. Your thoughts, your opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I was present, unfortunately. The only reason I was there was because I wanted to be able to say, yeah, I've been to a Soho Forum debate. I love Gene Epstein and the Soho Forum stuff. And actually, like 1 week prior, I didn't know that was going to be happening. So 1 week prior, I'm like, dude, I really want to be like in the audience at a Soho Forum debate. And I was like looking at the website and I was like, I need to like get over to New York City one of these days and be in the audience. That'll be cool. But then, they did it right there. So that was neat. It was kind of funny because it was the first like dual project between the Reason Foundation and the Mises Institute. So that's kind of funny. But like, as for the debate itself, I don't know. I mean, I thought both people made good points, but like, it seemed kind of pointless to me, like overall, debating Bitcoin versus gold, like whether or not Bitcoin is going to be replacing gold or gold's no longer going to be a form of money used in the 21st century. I don't know. It's like, if it happens, it happens. Like, why sit here and debate about it? Most of the people in the audience were gold bugs anyways. Like, you're not going to change their minds, and you're definitely not going to change a Bitcoin bro's mind. So
Right, yeah. If you have anything else you'd like to elaborate on, continue doing so, because I'll actually find the results and display them for the audience here to see real quick. Because I remember I wasn't big on either one, because this isn't my area of interest, and so in a way I was sort of like the perfect audience member for this discussion. Like, I had what I thought would happen, but I wasn't particularly convinced one way or the other. So I asked a question to the guy defending Bitcoin. How are you going to like get the elder members of the population to understand what on earth Bitcoin is? And his response was a very untactful answer. They'll die off eventually, which I don't think endeared many people to him.
Yeah, I made a silly meme about him.
Here, send that to me. Send that to me. I'll display it so the audience can actually see it.
Yeah, I think the whole like debate about like gold versus Bitcoin is essentially pointless. It will be what it will be. I mean, you can say, well, I should look at this logically so I can take a position on it, and I can be ahead in the future. But I don't know if the post-dollar society is going to have a similar division of labor to what exists now, in which case Bitcoin will be great, or if it's going to be just complete irradiated wasteland, in which case, well, there's no internet. So
right. So for the audience at home that can't see, perhaps watching on a phone or something, the resolution was, quote, "Gold will remain an important form of money in the 21st century." So that was the resolution. At the beginning, sort of like where the audience stood to begin with, 47% of the audience was in favor of gold. 22% of the audience was against the resolution, and as the debate went, sort of in favor of Bitcoin. But we'll get into why this was perhaps a poorly formulated resolution to begin with. And 30% of the audience was undecided. And at the end, 15% of people shifted over to gold. The Bitcoin side lost 2% of its people, and 12% of people ceased being undecided. So gold won at a 62% margin of the audience, and also a 15% change in popularity. So that was the results. Would anyone like to elaborate on sort of why this turning into a Bitcoin versus gold debate was perhaps not the best formulation for this discussion?
Well, I mean, it seems like gold and Bitcoin both have like different purposes. I'm always talking about like, stop having these debates over these specific issues when you can just take the position of having a social division of labor, or having whatever is good for certain things actually come out on top in those certain things. Like, Bitcoin obviously has advantages over gold in very specific areas, and gold obviously has advantages over Bitcoin in very specific areas. And both of the debaters made good points on both of those things. Like, right now Bitcoin is being used a lot in countries like Russia and China, and authoritarian countries where people are banned from, using credit cards or debit cards or whatever. They have their bank accounts seized for whatever reason, because, they're going against the government status quo. And they're able to use things like Bitcoin in situations where they wouldn't be able to use gold. So yeah, and you know, gold's a lot more stable than Bitcoin right now. So in terms of investment, you know, a lot of people lost a lot of money in Bitcoin that they wouldn't have lost in gold. So it's like, yeah, they obviously both have things that work out better for them. So it's kind of weird pitting them against each other.
In reference to the use of Bitcoin as sort of like an anti-banking tool, especially in China and Russia, I was talking to Tho about this actually. A lot of that's because the state allows them to. Basically, certain people are allowed to launder money and certain people aren't. And I think that we saw with like the Canadian truckers and their attempt to use Bitcoin, how that can be a bit risky if your state is not giving you special permissions to do money laundering. I don't know. I think I'm still a little wary of Bitcoin as an anti-censorship tool. It is impossible to stop, but it's just too easy to track.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I've heard criticisms about that before. Before we continue the discussion, the memes that came out of the entire week were fantastic. For anyone that can't read it, this one says POV. You're about to hear that gold will remain a relevant currency in the 21st century. It should be noted, the gentleman, and he gets flack for this in Twitter comments that I saw before the debate. So I have a feeling sharing this in a sort of non-aggressive manner. He has a very distinct physiognomy, which, be it what it will. I actually thought he was definitely the most convincing, and I actually got to hear him speak at the research conference back in March, where he presented on what he was doing with his endeavor called Monetary Metals, which is basically banking but with gold in the modern day. And it seems like a very if it's as he purports it to be, a very well-ran, a very sort of potentially innovative format of banking. So I thought he was good, and he's the side that I eventually came out on. But anyways, continue the discussion as we were talking about the security issues and the privacy issues with Bitcoin.
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw that with the truckers. Was as soon as they started getting large Bitcoin. They started getting large Bitcoin donations. There were the police were using blockchain analysis to figure out what wallets they had. And I think, I don't remember which exchanges it were. Most exchanges basically blacklisted those wallets. I think that, Monero solves most of those problems. It's not transparent at all, which actually can be a problem. But I don't think that like Bitcoin for dissidents in the long term is a good idea. I think it's too risky.
Right, because if it's not fungible, like you're just stuck with it and you can't use it for its
Bitcoins are
purpose.
non-fungible. They are unique, and that is the reality of it.
Yeah, and it isn't like the entire dark web. Basically, they basically use Monero now, and if they have to use Bitcoin, it's like they'll charge you a premium and then convert it to Monero. So
I'm not going to add on the subject because I know very little about the minute details of cryptocurrencies. That is a field that I'm not well read on. Now, with the debate itself, the original resolution that they posted was something along the lines of, in a post-dollar society, gold will be the main currency, something along those lines. And originally, I was opposed to that resolution because I thought, if the dollar collapses, people will use foreign currencies or silver or something like that. Silver is specifically instead of gold because it has a lot more usability, so it would be traded much more than gold would at the outset. But then the resolution that we ended up with that I showed earlier was gold will remain an important form of money in the 21st century, which brings up the question, is gold an important form of money of which it could lose that status? Which
it sounded to me like they've both of the debater, Pierre and I forget his name, but it sounded like they both agreed that it is a form of money today. so they're saying it's not demonetized.
Right, which is a very interesting assertion because, I have a feeling that if I were to just come across someone and I had like physical gold in my hand and I said, hey, I will give you this lump of gold for like these groceries that you just bought, they would probably make the trade. But if I like tried to purchase anything online or go into a store, I doubt the same trade would be made. I could be wrong, which suggests to me that it's not really an important form of currency or money right now, for which it could remain so as the topic of debate. That was a very interesting wording that they had.
Yeah, I mean, gold is, I don't see it being money today. It is, at the very highest levels, it is used as an asset for collateral for like bullion banks. So you could say it is a kind of money, and that collateral is traded. Like certificates for gold in bullion banks are traded at the very highest levels of the financial system, especially in Europe with the London bullion banks. But as far as fungible money, not really.
He was saying that they use it like it's held as a reservation demand, especially in like outside of the United States, which I am not privy to. So
It is, but I can't spend it at Amazon. that's the problem. Like
that's
I can't
fungibility,
go to
right?
the,
Or that's
go to Kroger Mart and buy, apples with 1/100th of an ounce of gold.
yeah, like that's saleability right there. Is if you can use it at Amazon or the store. So
Right, and audience member has pointed out, the dollar will not collapse only because the other currencies are even
Right.
worse. That is another line of reasoning that I heard being thrown about before the debate, which I'm not qualified to speak on because I'm not sure how currency collapses necessarily work with the central banking system that we have today. With the if the euro, the yen, the dollar, and all these other various different currencies were to collapse, I have no clue how that would play out. So I did not explore that line of reasoning that the dollar would not be the one collapsing, because everyone else would have to rely on it because their own collapsed. I have no clue how that will work, and I will not give the pretense that I do. Perhaps one of you gentlemen, though, have a thought on the subject.
Well, I'm actually gonna head out. I really have to pee, and then I need to eat breakfast. So,
Alrighty. Well,
it's been fun.
Yeah, it was wonderful to have you here. Thank you
Nice
for
to talk to
stopping
you
by,
again.
and
Yeah,
it was
see
nice
y'all
to meet
around.
you. Yeah.
See, man. I guess I could speak to that a little bit. I mean, so like kind of seeing the huge downward swing in Bitcoin, like over the past 2 months or so, maybe it's 3 months. I mean, like I think a lot of Bitcoin maximalists have this view, like, oh, it's inevitable. It's like a teleology of Bitcoin, and which may or may not be true, I guess, but pretending that it has that the Bitcoin itself acts and that this isn't dependent on the valuations of people as they choose to adopt Bitcoin is a serious error. So that's about Bitcoin, but then about the international monetary system. I mean, yeah, talking to especially some of the international people coming to Mises University, I mean, yeah, they're talking about how their currencies are experiencing significantly more inflation than we are. And as you can imagine, like if those currencies start failing, well, where are they going to go? They're going to go to the dollar first, I'd imagine, because of its saleability before they go to something like Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. So that does sound very plausible, but this also does hinge on the other currencies collapsing in use before the dollar, which I don't know how this necessarily works because it seems to me that it's not necessarily even the worst currency that would collapse first. It just has to be something, which I suppose you could then backtrack and argue, well, if it collapsed first, it was the worst. But that I don't think that.
Yeah, we don't want to hold that.
Right. There have been currencies in history before that have seemed at the outset rather strong, and then for one reason or the other, they collapse, usually as a result of the government was forcing people to trade in it, much like the current laws under the dollar now. and then something happens to the enforcement of the government. People stop trading in it because them trading in it in the first place was an artificial distortion. Something like this could happen, but I also don't know how the timing would necessarily work. So I stick to my original reasoning that assuming the dollar would collapse, which is the assumption that I'm holding to here and that the debate held to. I don't think gold would be the first thing that people would turn towards. I think it would probably be silver or other currencies, provided that they were stable and could escape whatever collapse happened to the dollar.
It's not clear to me. It's just not clear to me that fiat money, like fiat currencies, actually collapse in the way that commodity monies collapse, right? Because if you have a commodity money of a stock, a stock of silver coin, and you're just every time you remint it, you're adding like bronze to it, you will have just a currency collapse at a certain point. Whereas, if you look at the history of fiat money, I can't say, as long as there is a state, the state that issues that money has power, they don't really collapse. They just get redenominated. Eventually, they lose the vast majority of it. They become virtually valueless, and then they just get redenominated or reset into a new form of the currency. If you look at these hyperinflation cases, I think as long as the state that makes the currency persists, the currency itself will persist in some form, even if they'll have to, remint a neo dollar or something that is equal to 100,000 old dollars. As long as the U.S. government still has fiat, has power, I don't see how a collapse of that money would occur.
So I feel like that's pretty well covered, unless either of you two have any other aspects of the debate to add. Because I know there was Josh, I believe, mentioned the gentleman dropping the coin in order to produce the sound that gold makes.
That was Keith, by the way. I forgot his name.
Keith Weiner would be the full name of monetary metals. He also, as sort of a rhetorical trick, dropped a USB drive, presumably, that held Bitcoin on it, and he sort of shrugged his shoulders at the end. It was a rhetorical trick. I don't think he was trying to make a very conclusive point, but it was hilarious. And you had other... he got accused of being a historicist for saying one of his arguments was that, in history, gold is used basically by every civilization as currency. Therefore, it only makes sense to assume that it would be after the collapse of the dollar, since it's what people know. And he got accused of being a German historicist for drawing on historical empirical data in order to sort of extrapolate economic phenomenon. So that was a phenomena. Sorry, that was quite the accusation that I wasn't expecting going in. Very sort of
only at MisesU do you get accused of being a German historicist.
Right. And so I thought that was quite a...
I think, did they both agree later on, okay, that's not the case. It's more just an entrepreneurial argument, what will be. I think they conceded to that later on. So. Right.
Yeah. The closings were kind of like a turnaround because there were a lot of just sort of surprise concessions made at the end and in the Q&A as well, where either side would start saying, "Oh yeah, you have a point here," and it's kind of like, if this is like a full-on debate, you don't usually concede that the other side has a point on something that you disagree on. But however, that also goes to show the genuine nature of the discussion between the two, which was a breath of fresh air. So. Yeah, and during the Q&A, something that we mentioned earlier about the privacy and the downsides that go along with that with cryptocurrency, that was a topic of discussion during the Q&A, which one of the Bitcoin attacks on gold was that, well, the governments have already outlawed gold ownership in history before. So, obviously your arguments about Bitcoin being unsafe have no merit because they can just do the same thing with you. And so we went to a rabbit hole about how to hide gold from authorities and all of this other stuff. entertaining, even though it didn't really prove either side to me. So that was a very fun and engaging rabbit hole, even though it wasn't the most productive.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about like, well, would you give up your private keys to your crypto wallet if you were tortured or something? It's like, well, obviously, if like the full might of the state is wielded against you, you're probably going to be dispossessed, right? The question is, what's the best way to avoid, arousing the suspicion and ire of the state while still having some kind of money,
Right. So, if no one else has anything to add, I think we'll go on to sort of the more social aspect of things, which would have been Wednesday evening, where we had the evening to ourselves. We had to we had free reign of where to go to eat. We sort of formed into our naturally organized groups and headed out to Auburn, Alabama, and generally just had a good time. So, gentlemen, if you all would like to elaborate Wednesday evening. Probably at the core of the socializing, because that was still at the sort of like the line where people crossed from being new to each other to where, after Wednesday, I feel like people were much more close to each other, if you will.
Yeah.
So, John, Josh, if you will.
Trying to best restaurants in Auburn. Little Italy's. Absolutely recommend. It was great. I had a Mediterranean pizza. Yeah.
And you and I were in the same group.
Yeah.
And we had once again, as a recurring theme in our off time, we had religious discussions out the wazoo, which were very enjoyable because there were quite a few, and this might be shocking to some people online, that were not arguments, but rather just very constructive, very friendly discussion. Not something you would see on the likes of Twitter or Discord or anything like that. So, and Wednesday evening, the group that you and I were in was one of these examples where we had a lot of people discussing, in particular, Protestant theology. We went to a ice cream parlor towards the end of the evening, and we started getting into the, what Bible translation to use. What does grace alone and faith alone actually mean? Things like that, and it was a very nice and pleasant discussion between the group of ours. And there was other discussions that ran throughout the group. I know we talked about historical theory closer to the beginning of the dinner, because in our ranks was a gentleman that taught history, I believe, for high schoolers, or was it middle schoolers? I can't quite remember.
I'm not sure. I don't remember, but yeah, he was great.
Yeah, very well learned gentleman. Like that's how he introduced himself. He's like, "Oh, I'm just a history teacher," and then he when I first met him, and then he started going into all these different historical theories and historiographies and very not as well talked about concepts. Very pleasant discussion that we had.
I believe he was working on either like a translation of Job or something like that, or a commentary on Job with his friend who is he was touching on part of it, but his friend was the prime person there. So that was pretty awesome. You meet biblical scholars or people adjacent to biblical scholars at Mises University as well. So
and one of the discussions that we also had was, why aren't we fascists? Which might sound like a very hilarious proposition for a topic, but whenever you see what's going on outside in the world, and then whenever you look back into history, and whenever you see the groups of people online who are increasingly adopting the label, it suddenly becomes a question: why don't we join them? And we had a very healthy discussion for where we disagreed with on fascist philosophy. It was and much to my joy, no one came in and said oh well, the fascists are the scary right wingers. We didn't have any sort of left wing critiques of fascism. It was all very very nicely handled. Also, no sort of animosity either. No one sort of bought into the stereotype of fascism as the ultimate evil, which, it was a nice discussion all around. But John, I don't believe you were with our group, but I could just
No, I wasn't.
misremember.
I was hanging out with Evelyn at a mutual friend's house. We were talking about some IRL stuff that will be happening, some events that will be happening in the future that I don't think I'm at liberty to discuss in public. But it was fun. It was fun. There was talk about religion stuff too. On the interestingly enough, the why aren't we fascist question actually came up multiple times in multiple groups throughout the week, and it is an interesting question. And I just took the sort of the Hayek take, was that it was a stopgap. It doesn't have any staying power.
Right.
It stops the Reds from killing you, and then it just kind of falls apart after about 30 years.
Right, exactly.
I'm not talking about, Mussolini's fascism fell apart. It's like, well, no, that's not what happened. I mean, the, entire ire of, Moscow and Washington and London, just wiped him out. But I mean, if you look at the Iberian fascists, it just didn't last. They weren't able to build a system that was able to provide a standard of living so that people would not just turn to liberalism the second it was offered.
Right.
And that's the problem. And like you can say it's materialist, people, man does not live for bread alone. Well, right, but liberalism is sexy and it has lots of cool stuff. And even Franco, who tried to groom the Carlist monarch to be his successor and create a monarchy, just was not able to make that system last, because the second that King Carlos got into power, he was basically sucked into the NATO regime and became a liberal within like months.
And it should be worth noting for anyone onlooking that might be thinking about writing a hit piece, Mises students have to ask question, why aren't we fascists? It didn't come up that way, but it did. The discussion did turn into that, but I much more prefer having that discussion than some of the more left libertarians that have to ask themselves, why aren't we anarcho-communists? Because, unlike them, we actually kept our principles and kept our positions even after criticizing them with something that was very controversial. Whereas I know many supposedly principled left-wing libertarians, quote unquote, might be closer to libertines that just end up flipping towards soft communism, which, I much more prefer these discussions and the results from them than we otherwise could have had in any other groups. But gentlemen, I figured we should offer ourselves some insurance there if you'd like to continue the discussion.
I'd go back to the not by bread alone question. And yeah, that's true. We do not live by bread alone. We are both spiritual as well as embodied beings. So, if you neglect the body, I mean that's Manichaeanism. That's what Saint Augustine ended up going against back in the day. And then what's the alternative? If you're just a body, then just let the passions take you forward. So that'd be more libertinism. I think both errors are significant. And then just going into the week, I did not really come to Mises University to argue with people. It was more just like hearing all those different perspectives. From you had your more normie or entry-level libertarians. There's one person who was not cool with Catholic school or something like that. They regretted their upbringing.
The meme.
Yeah. So, but then on the other hand, like there's people like Christian nationalists. So you had quite a big, and then people among the dissident right more broadly. So it was just listening to their perspectives was such a valuable experience.
And it should be the first night, Sunday evening, like the first night we ever did anything. I drove a couple people home from the Institute because we, for various reasons, missed the shuttle back to the hotel. And when they were in my car, they were talking about the Libertarian Party and how they did not like the nominee for the last presidential election. And it was, and I pointed this out to them. I'm not like going behind their back and, snidely criticizing them. They were talking about, oh, she didn't once say the word lockdown or anything like that. She was too soft. And very sort of milquetoast critiques. And I eventually just broke the conversation. I said, gentlemen, I don't know if you guys have considered this, but I don't think most people would vote for a woman. It's not really it doesn't fit with sort of like Christian tradition at all, and that's what most of us, including myself, follow. And the whole car went silent. And one of the gentlemen asked me, so you're actually a sexist? And what can you
forgot to attach the GigaChat image.
And so, what could I respond with? By those standards, yeah, I guess. We had a few sort of conversations that in our spheres would have been more palatable like 6 or 7 years ago that were being discussed at the event. A minority, though, it should be added. So it was a very interesting discussions to be had whenever you see the more right-leaning libertarians come into contact with the slightly more to the left libertarians. It was hilarious, I think. So, any other events, any other socializings that you would all like to discuss? Because that was a big part of the attendance that I thought was if this had just been done online, like some other events have been done in the last 2 years, definitely would not have been the same at all. So. Anything else, gentlemen?
Yeah, nothing off the top of my head. I'm not sure how much of those interactions I'd even like at liberty to discuss. Just like so.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Same here.
Not that it was like anything that I'd be afraid of. It's just like I'm not sure. So.
Right. You don't want to betray trust or anything. Yeah. So. Socializing, great aspect. We touched on the lecturers, the debate. I feel like I'm missing something rather important. What am I missing, gentlemen? Because I feel like those are the main topics.
Was it Lou Rockwell's speech?
Yeah. Okay. So so we had multiple sort of not economics affiliated speeches other than the last ones of the event, which included political theater with Lou Rockwell and Jeff Deist. So, very, very informative, I thought. And there were a lot of questions that were talked about, and I'm sure that you guys will remember ones that I didn't. But the one that really stuck with me was Lou Rockwell was asked, what do you think of sort of like the intellectual capabilities of pop intellectuals like Jordan Peterson?
Oh, yes.
And Lou Rockwell, much to my everlasting joy, responded with, "Oh, I don't think much of Jordan Peterson." So, I was in good company at that point. So, I'll leave it there. I'll elaborate at the end. Gentlemen, what did you think about political theater?
Oh, Lou Rockwell in that moment was a man who lived in New York City on VE Day, just teleported to the modern era. Like that's the reaction you would have. You could just see in his face just pure disgust with everything going on. He is truly to have seen America in its zenith, right? And now to see this is truly, I don't know what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
Right, he's definitely a man from a different era that gets to catch most of the decline in its most destructive years, definitely.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think I have too much to add more than that. I mean, it was just such an honor to get to be there with the great Lou Rockwell. And I now have, I think, 2 Lou Rockwell books. So I'd say mission accomplished.
Yeah, very good, very good. I remember at the research conference back in March, I got him to sign one of the books that I got, but also something else that I embarked upon, another adventure, was getting all of the presenters and important people to sign one of the books that they gave us, and I had them sign the Bastiat collection, which they provided for us. So now I've got like the signatures of Tho Bishop, Jeff Dice, Lou Rockwell, Thomas D. Lorenzo, all of the presenters. Very happy about that. I don't know if any of you guys did the same.
No, that's great.
I didn't. I feel like I should have, but like, I don't know. Something seems weird about like asking people to sign stuff IRL. I've never been comfortable doing it, but I did buy Tom Woods' book, Church in the Market.
Okay.
And that's been a good read. It's very black-pilling. Man, it's so black-pilling. It's like, wow, I thought Catholic social teaching was a little bit broken. No, it's actually really broken. It's actually way more broken than I thought it was, and it didn't have to be.
That would be a topic for an entirely different stream, especially with...
I put that in the feedback. I put that should, like, the history of, like, Catholic thought as far as economics goes and how bad it went when it didn't need to would be like a great lecture at a future MisesU to have Tom Woods go through the history of the School of Salamanca and the Scholastic tradition and how basically they just got ignored.
Because that's I won't say often overlooked, because there's definitely many great scholars in the Austrian tradition that will do that sort of history. But it's definitely not at the forefront, the sort of scholastic genesis that brought about the Austrian tradition. Catholic scholastics, and then we don't have very many Protestant-centric Austrian historians. But from what I can see, there seems to have been quite a few Protestants that have been entirely overlooked as well. But the Catholics get the forefront in this respect. For the simple fact that they did the most work in the developing of I believe it was especially be subjective value. From a scholastic viewpoint, and many other concepts, but that would be the main one. And then you look at sort of the modern Catholic Church teachings today, where it's much more socialistic, and I've been assured by the people that are in my circles that are Roman Catholic that do hold to Catholic social teaching that it's nothing of the sort, but I can't shake
it is of that sort, exactly that sort. It's pretty bad. I mean, he goes into it. I mean, the church has essentially tried to deny the existence of marginal utility. It's tried to deny the existence of like discounted marginal revenue products. It's pretty bad. It's been a bit of a problem.
Right. So, and just for the audience, you're not exactly some hardcore Protestant critiquing.
No, I'm a TLM Catholic. I'm a cantor at Latin Mass every week.
So, that's for the Roman Catholics that are in my audience, of which I know there's quite a contingency. I haven't just brought in some terrible Protestant to critique the Roman Catholic social teachings, but rather this is coming from within. Tom Woods himself also, I don't think, would be considered an outsider to the Roman Catholic Church. So,
no, his greatest critics would say he is, but I mean, his greatest critics also believe in like geocentrism. Not that that's like not based. But like I'm serious. Like his critics say not only, I mean, like I kind of agree with it. It's like things did not go wrong with Vatican II. That's a misconception that Vatican II, everything was great and Vatican II just ruined it. Like there's problems going back probably to the papacy of Pius IX, when they started taking books off of the index of prohibited books.
Right. So, this could be a good topic for a stream because I've got a lot.
Yeah, it would be. The history of the relationship with natural science and the church is fascinating.
Yeah, natural science, Vatican II, and Catholic social teaching, because there's a few people that come to mind. I believe Settlers Lament, maybe the distributist, would defend Catholic social teaching in some capacities or all. And then we also have the more Austrian tradition, it seems, of Roman Catholic thought. So that's a good future stream topic. Don't let me forget that, because that would be fun to explore, especially being as I'm from the outside. So it would be relaxing for me to just ask questions and not have to worry about winning or losing the argument. So
read everything by Dr. Guido Holzman.
Right. Yeah. So there's great potential there. Also, it would answer the question: how do the Roman Catholics go from the Salamanca school to the sort of American workers movement that was very heavily Roman Catholic influence, that looks nothing like the sort of scholasticism of the was it the 13th century?
Okay, it's complicated. There was
Quickly,
after the Napoleonic War, there was like this real crisis of legitimacy within the church, which required taking on a lot of the more fashionable natural sciences. So Pius IX basically allowed Newtonian mechanics to be taught, and that opened the floodgates of basically reinterpreting what had been considered not only dogma, but just fact, right? I mean, the scholastics just believed as a fact that the earth was more like less than 10,000 years old, probably more than 4,000 years old. They believed that it was the center of the universe. They believed it didn't move. They believed that man was about as old as the earth. But after Pius IX, you start to see this sort of chaos of different interpretations coming in, and the church taking a more agnostic approach, while simultaneously ignoring economics as it was seen as a fundamentally liberal logic. They didn't know. I don't think any of the popes, even to this day, have really read into the school of Salamanca, or many of the scholastics like Saint Bernardino of Siena, who had developed theories of price and wage, centuries before the marginalists had. But that for some reason, economics was just fundamentally rejected as seen as materialist, whereas other natural sciences were kind of allowed to be tossed around and reinterpreted as they willed.
And before we move too far from the point, it's my understanding, but this could be flawed, that the Roman Catholic Church today has no official position on sort of the old creationism versus evolutionism debate, because I've seen
kind of. So Vatican I, and since then they've established that pretty much that the Earth is not the center of the universe and does move. Right, the heliocentrism is not. I don't think you're not in disobedience to the church if you don't believe that, but it's definitely so. Pius XII legitimized the belief in human evolution, but did not officially endorse polygenism, which means that you are allowed to believe that pre-humans evolved up to a point, but then from them came two humans, and they are the source of all humans today. So even though 100% of your DNA might not come from those original two humans, right, there is at least some of the two humans within you, right? However, virtually none of the popular Catholic apologists acknowledge this. So polygenism is the common belief. So if you go to like Catholic Answers and stuff, and Jimmy Akin and Trent Horn, they accept polygenism, which is weird because it is pretty explicitly condemned in Humani Generis. So that's kind of the state of what you are allowed to believe, and how, de facto and de jure magisterium are not necessarily the same thing.
Right. So, as perhaps the audience could parse from this, there's great discussion to be had here, and that's one of the reasons why we are doing this stream, is because with all the new personalities that I have now personally met, we have quite a lot of talent that we can draw upon, especially for discussions like the aforementioned Roman Catholic social teaching discussion. But also, Josh, I believe that you proposed to me the idea of writing one article a day to sort of draw upon our writing abilities. If you would like to elaborate more on if we were to hold to that, what would that look like? What are we doing? What's the point? It isn't that insane.
Okay, so this is actually where I got the idea, I believe, from Isaac Morehouse, who I believe he's a Christian, but he's been in the Mises like libertarian circles, but he's more of a businessman himself. But basically, there's like this writing challenge where 30 days, like for a month, you want to get better at writing. So what you do is you just start like writing like an article or something once every day. If you can't get something that's more outward facing, do like more of a private journal. But actually, so I was not able to write. I tried to start it the past week. I was not able to write every day, but I did like just write in my own notes and things like that. I also got an article up on Mises.org as of 6 hours ago, titled "Rothbard Was Right About Water Fluoridation." So one of my crowning achievements in life now. I believe this is my second article on Mises.org. But,
yeah, one moment. I'll pull that up and we can send that into the chat, but keep going.
But so as far as like the writing things go, it's just more, think of it like as a muscle. You want to practice it, and the best way to learn is by doing. So starting small and building up from there. And then the article itself, I had emailed Ryan McMakin to submit it because I'd worked on it during the week, and I literally just found out during the stream because it was already up. So
magnificent.
Awesome.
So the link that I just posted in chat is Josh's article for Mises. And you and I, on the last day that we were in Auburn on a Sunday, actually discussed this issue where you were talking about sort of either the failure of regulating water supply content, or the failure of regulating it too much and sort of putting way too much in there, or trying to standardize it for everyone where water content should not be standardized. So if you would like to elaborate, sort of just point to your own work here.
Yeah, so I guess Rothbard in a 1992 essay, I believe for New American Magazine, titled "Fluoridation Revisited," he talks about how like in the 1950s and earlier, so in my article I talk about the Mellon Institute and Alcoa, different special interests at play, power elites at play, basically have this sodium fluoride as a byproduct of their production processes. So they need something to do with it. So what they do is they lobby to require it in, or maybe not require, they lobby to get it in local water supplies, arguing that it improves dental health. However, there's been a ton of research since then. There was a meta-analysis published in 2019 by Professor Philippe Grandjean. And basically, it has very significant effects on developmental IQ, fluoridation of the water. So it gets into urine, and it crosses the like the womb barrier, and is a neurotoxin. So I believe the research so I emailed Professor Grandjean, and he pointed me to another paper to get like the amount of basically the benchmark level for a point drop in IQ, and it's 0.2 milligrams per liter in the water supply, and the recommended level by the CDC is 0.7, which is 3.5 times that. So I just did like a short calculation, like estimating like the total amount of people's water that is fluoridated, and then the people born in a given year, and you just multiply those numbers out. And I believe for 2020 it was where's my numbers, 9 point something million IQ, you can say IQ points just lost. So yeah.
Right. And it should be worth noting that that's the recommended. There are some water supplies that could be higher than the recommended level.
And there are some that are lower that I'm not even counting in that number.
Right.
So
And there's also other things that you pointed me to a website that checks contents of water supplies, and we were going through various ones near to where we live, and you might find things like there's 4 times the recommended amount of chloroform in your water or something like that. Something entirely insane that you wouldn't necessarily expect, that you might be able to rationalize after the fact, but it really makes you wonder, with all the talk about water purity that came out of sort of like the 70s environmental movement, and then they tout that as sort of a victory, and all the regulations that they brought with it. Where's the victory? So very good work at sort of dispelling the or towards, I shouldn't say that it's entirely gone now, it's certainly just one article, but very good work towards going against the orthodoxy on that front, I would say.
I think there's definitely like a huge maybe like gap, or there's a ton of kind of at the intersection of like health and like some of these environmental studies, but a lot of these environmentalists are not, or at least not openly on like a Austrian free market economic type of view. And when you kind of combine the two, you kind of, it's just plain as day, like the effects of these government policies. So,
right.
Yeah, I always filter the fluoride out of my water. I have one of those zero water filters. Zero water filters. Yeah, official sponsor of the show. Zero water filters.
Oh yes.
They work real well. Like it's disgusting. Like I can't. I've become militantly anti-tap water. I just can't justify drinking it. That's kind of my most Bugman attribute, is that I have to like filter my water with fancy plastic contraption before consuming it. I don't water, get excited for next water.
Yeah. I don't know if that's Bugman-like, because I feel like the Bugman would be yelling at us right now for daring to
drink the water.
Yeah, for daring to question the CDC's recommendations.
Not even drink the corn syrup, drink the water.
So, did you see the Eric Adams like New York City tap water ad?
Which one?
The one where he's like, "Oh, I never leave the house without tasty New York City tap water." And it's like puts it in like thermos. It's like, what?
Before we put a pin in that discussion, I just got one question. Have you ever seen a commie drink water? If anyone else has anything to add, I suppose we'll move on, because or I'd not move on, but back to the original topic matter on writing one article a day. I mentioned that there was a Lutheran pastor in attendance for most of MisesU, Reverend Larry Bean, who runs a very what's the quote? One of its detractors called it a very popular liturgical magazine. So he runs that, he edits it. I sent in an article to him a few days ago, and it should be going out sometime in the very near future if it's not already there. And it's on the topic of idolatry, sort of as the new method of witch hunting. If you don't like your opponent, you accuse them of idolatry. And for some reason, just looking at the amount of headlines and articles talking about the state of idolatry in the U.S., I don't think it's a genuine concern. I think there might be a sort of left-wing tint to all of it. That article is going to be going out. I will post the link and advertise it whenever it is out. And I also sent in an article to Lou Rockwell for LRC on Christian nationalism as the new media boogeyman. So I've taken this up. I did not finish something yesterday, but I have made headway for something that I'm going to send into Mises on managerialism and entrepreneurship. So I like this idea, because if we do this successfully, and if we get more and more people in on it who have time and are willing to do so, we can sort of form like a very solid generation of our guys, writing the content and putting it out there. It has potential to be very well organized and very productive, I think.
David Gordon's top men.
Sorry, my audio did something strange there. Could you repeat that?
Our guys, David Gordon's top men.
Right. Oh, okay. So, yeah, that's in my bio now on Twitter. David Gordon's top guy, and it's because I should have mentioned this earlier when Praxman was still here. We all took the oral exam, and this is something I should have talked about earlier.
Yes.
At Mises University, you can take a written exam, sort of near the end of it, and if you pass that, you move on to the oral exam. And if you pass the first round, the entire faculty questions you, and you have to orally answer their questions, and then you have the potential to win scholarships or just get the distinction. So every single person that was on the stream, I believe, participated in at least the first rounds of the oral exam, but I don't remember who made it the second round. I didn't make it to the second round, but if you pass the first round, you pass, and that's quite a distinction in and of itself. So I've been told. Gentlemen, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I didn't pass. Yeah, it was not difficult stuff, but just I haven't read Human Action in years, so that's what I'm doing this week, is rereading Human Action. I'm already starting to see where I goofed up. I could see like the disappointment in Dr. Salerno's face. But why are the no prices under socialism? Like what part of the state-managed economy prevents rational economic calculation with money prices?
All right. So, Dr. Salerno's accent, or manner, colloquialism's accent, it grows on you after a while. It's amazing. You can listen to him speak for quite a while, and that's the content of his lectures were fantastic. If he had like the non-accent of Oklahoma, being as we're the only people who have no accent, would have still been fantastic. But his manner of speakings and his discreet sense of humor, I would say, I quite enjoyed. He has an appreciation for old political cartoons that were critiquing the Soviets. I can really appreciate that. Very wonderful presentations from him. But anyways, the oral exam. So they ask some very basic questions. John hinted at some of what they would ask, and you just have to be able to coherently and rationally explain it within the span of 10 minutes, and you have to get through, I believe, the average was like 7 questions or so. Some people can go less or more depending on what you get through. And they grade you, and you either pass or fail. So I believe Evelyn Grant, the other content producer in the Sphere, and I, we both passed, but we did not make it on to the second round. And I didn't realize you could pass but not advance. And I went to the people that were the gentlemen that were questioning me, and it was the reason I didn't pass is they said, I did fine content-wise, but I just didn't answer enough questions. We didn't get far enough. So they passed me, but I didn't advance. So, that's a consideration. The actual physical speaking part of it is part of the exam, which I quite enjoyed.
You were too thorough, so they couldn't pass you.
Right. Yeah, we only got through 5 questions, I think. And then, there were some people getting through 8 or 9. So, I'm very happy I passed. I'm not at all sad or annoyed at it. So and it gives me something to look forward to next year. I know what to do now next year if I go back and retry.
It was good. I participated in all 3 rounds. So I passed the written, passed the we call the first oral discussion one, or not discussion, question answer one.
Right.
And then on the third one, I did pretty good. I ended up getting in the top 6 total. So I got the distinction award, whatever that is.
Right. Yes. That was very impressive.
So that was cool. The question that stumped me was from Grove City's own Dr. Herbner, and it was.
Of course. Yeah. Go.
So first he asked, are there Cantillon effects in an unhampered market economy, where say it's gold, does gold mining cause Cantillon effects? And I answered yes. So it went on from there. But then
So-
he asked,
Yeah,
does
go
that
on.
cause a business cycle? And I just passed on it because I'm actually, well, I'll talk through. So I passed on it at the time, and
Mhm.
just to get to the next question, because I'm actually at the time I was unsure on it. There's an article by Bob Murphy on Mises.org that literally argues both ways. Like, oh, here's like a Rothbardian economics case for why there would be no business cycle, and here's one for why there would be. So I'm like, wow, this is a great question. But what I should have done is pick one, or at least like talk through it to come to an answer. But that's okay. And so I think what I've come down to is, yes, there would be one at this point. There would be
Right,
a
and
cycle.
so yeah, of course, it would be Dr. Herbner that would ask such a kill shot of a question. But also, Jonathan Newman at the research conference presented a paper where he argued that gold mining does not cause inflation in the technical sense, and which sounds like a very sort of how on earth can he arrive at that conclusion? The point lies in the technical sense, I believe, if I understood it correctly, and he should be. I'm going to be in contact with him to try to actually read the full article, because it's a productive act and it responds to supply and demand. And in like a gold standard, this it would not technically be considered inflation in the sort of very narrow Austrian sense, because it's not coming from it's not artificial, basically, if I understood it correctly. So if you had been there for that, you could add into the confusion. Does a business cycle get caused by like an expansion in gold supply and a gold standard? So,
is it an artificial business cycle or is it a real business cycle? Which that goes to another
goes into the nature of
theory of the business cycle too.
Yeah. So very wonderful. And I would just like to clarify something from the chat here. So, one of the people said, so basically knowing the answers isn't enough. You also have to speak fast. And I don't want to sort of misconstrue what's happening here. It's not necessarily that you have to speak quickly in order to get everything in. You have to know the content so well as to be thorough, but also succinct.
Yes.
Which, if you have listened to me on Steven's channel over at Radical Liberation, you would know that I could definitely work on being succinct.
Yeah, you can't just recite the textbook answer. You have to have thought about it enough. You can reduce it to about half the normal way.
Right.
So
I thought about like reading Menger's theory of a good beforehand, and just recite that the entire time.
I mean,
probably not a good idea.
I mean, you would think if you just read enough David Gordon, you could eventually just build everything up from basic axioms. But I have a feeling 10 minutes would have cut that.
Right.
The oral exams was definitely, and like I mentioned, I didn't know that you could pass but not go on to the next round. So we had sort of like the closing ceremony where they announced the people that won the scholarships from the oral exam, and it was Dr. Salerno that was announcing it. And I remember I basically just resigned any hope of having gotten any sort of distinction because I didn't make it to the next round. And he said my name over the microphone, and I jumped, not out of joy or happiness, but you aren't expecting something, so you get really surprised, and it kind of rattles your bones. It was that it scared the crap out of me. I was like, what? So it was a very pleasant surprise thereafter. I didn't I had resigned hope after not seeing that or after seeing that I hadn't made it on. So very very wonderful turn of events for me there, but it's not for the faint of heart. So, anything else from the event, gentlemen? Because we don't have a time slot that we have to fill. So if we run out of things to talk about, that's perfectly fine.
I'd say that's pretty much it. I would say it was a pleasure going to the Lutheran church service with you on Sunday. So
yeah, I managed to nab you along into attending a LCMS church service in Auburn, Alabama. It was I thought it was a very cozy happening.
Yeah. The liturgy was very familiar. There's only a few slight differences from my own tradition. Well, I guess I'm not officially a member of my own tradition, but we'll see.
Right. So, and English Lutheran liturgy draws a lot from the Book of Common Prayer, just
Right.
because the old Lutheran liturgy was in German, as you might be able to guess. So the service book that we were using, and the setting in there, it was sort of like an updated, more modern version that you would find in the Book of Common Prayer. So I felt a little bit bad of not warning you. It would have almost exactly the exhortations and the readings that you would hear from the pastor, and you would want to say something like "with thy spirit," something
Yeah.
you find in the Book of Common Prayer. But that's not what's written in the modern liturgy, so it ended up causing minor confusion. But there's something that I can appreciate in there of having of knowing sort of like the old liturgy translate into English enough to where if you hear something, not just instinctually but also mentally what to respond with, because it's not like you started saying something and then trailed off when it wasn't that.
Right.
You knew what to say, which was
Yeah.
a very heartwarming event, because I find myself doing that in other places as well.
I liked the singing of, I believe it was the Song of Simeon. I really liked the hymnal version of that. So
yeah. So previous on one of these past streams, I had a discussion with a gentleman named Panama Hat, which I'm sure my audience is well aware with. We had a sort of foray into discussion of hymnody and liturgy, and I figure that could be a stream topic in and of itself, very cozy and relaxed for anyone that wants to come and talk about that in the future. So I might just organize that if ever one of these weeks I have either I don't have something pre-planned, or if I just feel like something cozy, because hymns are beautiful.
absolutely.
So yeah, definitely impressed by the especially Christian nature of a lot of the gentlemen at the event. So, John, anything else you would like to add to the recounting of MisesU 2022?
Well, hold on. Well, I'm going to have to go back and read some more books.
Yeah.
Well, that oral exam, I don't think horribly on it. I think it was one question about disutility of labor that I goofed really badly. But yeah, I got to go back and read some books. I might submit some stuff to Mises Wire. I think I showed you that article that I wrote a long time ago.
Direct democracy.
Yeah. I don't know if that's just kind of superfluous because no one cares about direct democracy anyway. I think it's people intuitively know that it's stupid.
Well, our people do. But,
yeah.
Like we were talking about, not everyone, even at MisesU, was our people. They were on the way, or they had different ideological or economic opinions. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that something basic like a critique of direct democracy, even though your critique was in no ways basic, but the topic itself, I think, is definitely necessary.
Yeah, I think the Mises Institute is the parallel institution, right? It is the closest thing we have to a true parallel institution so far. I mean, nothing really else in the United States comes close. I'm really excited to see what's going to go on under the leadership of Mr. Dice, Mr. Bishop going forward. And I'll definitely reapply next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely am looking forward to attending in the next couple of years, because that was the other thing. I felt like I was on the sort of younger side of the event, because there were a lot of times when people offered to, offered me alcohol, because it was just an event. Offered me alcohol, offered to take me to the bar and all this other stuff, and I had to politely explain, I don't know if you want that on your criminal record, because I'm not exactly 21 yet. So
it was fun. So with some people who are under 21, it just going on. I mean, I'm over 21, but I tried to limit my alcohol intake. So it was fun just I think one day we walked on the Auburn University campus, got to explore a little. Really nice architecture there. So
Yeah, there were a lot of buildings that were definitely very old in nature, very beautiful architecturally speaking. So, very pleasant place overall. I like I said, my high expectations were wildly surpassed. So, and yeah, to John's point earlier, my library probably doubled in size as a result of this trip.
yeah.
So, um, and then the great thing about the Mises Institute is they have a lot of books that get donated to them, and they very cheaply sell off the duplicates. So, I now have a ton of old books to add to my collection, old history books predating 1945, the sort of golden era of historical knowledge relative to today. So, I've got a lot to read. I'm certain you guys have a lot to read. And hopefully, if we do formalize this sort of aggressive writing strategy of one article a day or something similar, hopefully we can produce something good here.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
So I'll let you two, if you have any last thoughts, we'll go through them, and I think we're about ready to wrap up.
Yeah, that pretty much covers it. I appreciate you having both of us on. So,
alrighty, John.
Yeah, I think it's been a great talk. I'll be happy to come on anytime and talk about any number of topics. I'm really excited to see what the Mises Institute will do in the future.
Magnificent, and hopefully we can be at the forefront of that. So I have the links to both of your public profiles in the description. I will be adding Praxbin's because, like I said, I got caught unprepared due to my terrible miscommunication with him. His information will be added to the description post-haste. And with that, I believe that we are ready to wrap up. Once again, like I mentioned at the beginning, if you like what I am doing here, please consider becoming a supporter. Being gone for 2 weeks in a row is a very rare occurrence for me, I believe. And hopefully, with the knowledge that I've gained, it will more than pay itself off in the future. So with that, I believe that we are ready to sign off. Have a good rest of the day, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning.